They brought him across the ocean like he was nothing more than cargo, a man ripped from the soil of his home, from the laughter of his family, from the rhythm of a life he had known. Imagine being torn from everything that made you whole and thrown into a world that doesn't see your face as human. That was Ota Benga. That was the beginning of a story most of America would rather forget. Welcome, I'm Simmons, and this is Chronicles of Black. If you want to uncover stories that were almost erased, hit subscribe now and join the conversation in the comments. Tell me what you feel, tell me what you think. This isn't just history, it's a reflection of what happens when humanity is forgotten. Ota Benga was born in the forests of the Congo, a boy who grew into a young man under the sun, running barefoot, laughing, learning the ways of his people. He had a life, a name, a family who counted on him, a culture that shaped him, and then, in an instant, the world he knew was stolen. Men with strange uniforms and weapons came. They didn't see him as Ota. They didn't see him as a son, a brother, a human being. To them, he was something else, something to possess, to study, to display. They told him nothing, explained nothing. One day he was home, under the tall trees of his village. The next, he was in a ship's dark hold, the smell of fear and sweat thick around him. He didn't know where he was, or what awaited him. All he knew was that he had no control, no voice, and no protection. His world had been stolen, and in its place was a cage of uncertainty, pain, and terror. That the people around him spoke a language he did not understand. The food they offered tasted wrong. The sun that once warmed his skin now felt alien, distant, and yet he survived. Every day he survived, trying to hold on to the faint memory of home. But survival came with a cost. His mind screamed for freedom, for family, for the life that had been violently taken from him, and he had no one to hear him. Ota Benga was young, strong, and alive, yet in the eyes of his captors, he was something less than human. Something that could be pointed at, mocked, displayed. He had not done anything wrong. He had not broken a law. And yet, here he was stripped of his humanity before he had even been given a chance to understand the world he had been thrown into. You can feel it, can't you? The confusion, the shock, the heartbreak. This is more than history. This is a mirror showing what happens when a society allows greed, curiosity, and prejudice to override basic human decency. Even in this darkness, Ota Benga clung to his identity. His eyes searched faces, trying to find kindness. His heart held on to memory, the songs of his village, the stories his elders told, the warmth of hands he could no longer touch. He had nothing in this new world but his own mind, his own memory, and the stubborn refusal to be erased entirely. America had seen him and decided he was not fully human, not worthy of respect, not entitled to the dignity every person is born with. They would later try to erase him from history, as if hiding the truth could make it disappear. But the world, even now, cannot ignore the pain and courage of Ota Benga. His story matters. It screams for recognition, and today, we honor it, here, on Chronicles of Black. The moment he stepped onto American soil, Ota Benga became a symbol of a system willing to dehumanize anyone it chose. He was alone in a crowd, invisible in plain sight. He had been stolen, transported, and placed where the rules of decency did not apply to him, and yet, within him there was still a fire yearning to survive. To belong, to be seen not as an exhibit, but as a man. Ota Benga was not in a home, not in a village, not even in a place that acknowledged his humanity. He was in a cage, a young man with dreams and laughter and a beating heart, reduced to an exhibit. People came in and stared, whispered, laughed. Some pointed, some took notes, some smiled, thinking this was entertainment. But Ota Benga felt every eye as a weight, every finger as a judgment. Every laugh as a reminder that he had been stripped of the one thing no one could steal before, his life. Imagine standing in a space where your voice does not matter, where your pain is ignored, your fear treated like curiosity. He was displayed at a zoo in the heart of America. Children pressed their faces against the glass, asking questions their parents answered with polite lies. Is he really like us? They would wonder, and the answer was yes. He was just like us. But the world had decided he was not. He tried to speak. He tried to show his thoughts, his feelings, his intelligence, but no one listened. No one cared. The men in suits, the visitors, the reporters, they didn't see him as a human being. They saw something strange, exotic, a thing to be observed. And every day he was reminded that being different was a crime in a world that called itself civilized. There were moments when he would retreat to the corner of the cage and close his eyes, trying to remember his village, trying to hear the river, the drums, the voices of his people. He could feel the sunlight, but it was not warm, it was alien. The grass beneath him was not his home. The air was not his air. Every breath reminded him of the distance, the theft, the cruelty. And it was the weight of a society that refused to acknowledge him as human. It was the embodiment of centuries of prejudice, of a culture willing to display a man for curiosity and amusement while ignoring the dignity every human is born with. Every day, he carried the humiliation, the fear, the loneliness, and yet, he survived. Even in that cage, he refused to vanish entirely. His eyes searched faces for empathy, his mind held on to memory, his spirit clung to identity. He had been put on display, yes, but he was not broken. He was human, and in that humanity, he found a quiet rebellion, a refusal to let them erase him completely. Even in the shadow of that cage, Ota Benga found pieces of himself that no one could steal. Small gestures, a smile at someone who looked at him with curiosity rather than cruelty, a nod to a stranger who treated him like a person. These moments were fleeting, but they mattered. They reminded him that he still existed, that he still had a place in the world, even if the world refused to acknowledge it. He spoke when he could, not to educate or entertain, but to remind himself and anyone willing to listen that he was a man. He tried to teach those who asked simple questions, showing the richness of his language, his culture, his understanding of life beyond what they could imagine. It was a quiet defiance. In every word, every glance, every small act, he resisted being erased. Sometimes, someone would bring him a book. He would sit for hours, tracing letters with his fingers, absorbing knowledge that was meant to connect him with a world that had so violently rejected him. He read with hunger, not for entertainment, but for survival. Every new word, every story he absorbed, was a way to claim his humanity, to remind the world and himself that he belonged to no cage, that no one could erase his mind. There were also rare gestures of kindness. A visitor might offer a smile, a worker might share a piece of fruit, someone might ask his name and actually listen when he answered. These moments were small, almost imperceptible, but they were enough to kindle hope. Hope that not everyone had been blinded by prejudice. Hope that somewhere, the world could recognize him as a human being. Even in despair, he remembered home. He closed his eyes and envisioned the forests of his village, the river singing under the sun, the faces of those he loved. Those memories were his armor, the only thing no one could touch. And, in that armor, he carried his dignity. He refused to surrender it entirely. Time passed, and the small sparks of hope in Ota Benga's life began to dim. The world that had stolen him showed no mercy, no understanding, no regard for his pain. The kindnesses were fleeting, the moments of recognition rare. Most people still saw him as an object, a curiosity, a man less than human. And slowly, that weight began to crush him. He grew quieter. The words he once used to hold onto himself became whispers, fading into the emptiness around him. He wandered through the halls of his confinement, searching faces for someone who could see him, not the cage, not the display, but him. And almost always, he found only blank eyes, only indifference. The cruelty of society was not loud or dramatic, it was quiet, persistent, and relentless. America had caged him once, and society had done nothing to undo it. His death was a stark, devastating reminder of how far prejudice can stretch on how easily a man's life can be dismissed when humanity is denied. Ota Benga's story should make us furious, heartbroken, and reflective. It is a story of a society that looked away while cruelty unfolded, a story of innocence stolen and dignity denied. But it is also a story of a man who, even in despair, held on to pieces of himself that no one could take entirely. His life was short, but his struggle is a mirror to the injustices that still linger in the shadows today. Ota Benga is gone, but his story refuses to be silenced. It lingers in history, in memory, in the quiet realization that society once looked at a man and decided he was less than human. It's a reminder of what prejudice, fear, and indifference can do when left unchecked. And it's a call for us not just to remember, but to act, to acknowledge, to ensure that no one is ever treated this way again. We cannot undo the past. We cannot bring Ota Benga home, but we can honor him by recognizing the truths that were once hidden, by speaking the names that history tried to erase, and by refusing to let injustice go unnoticed. His struggle is not just a story of grief and despair, it is a story of dignity, courage, and the unbroken human spirit. Even in a cage, he resisted erasure. Even in silence, he persisted. And that is the lesson we must carry forward. When the world seems blind, when society seems indifferent, when cruelty appears normal, we must choose to see. We must choose to listen. We must choose to stand. Because the same systems that caged Ota Benga can still trap others in injustice, even today. and if we do not act, history has a way of repeating itself. His story is ours to remember, ours to honor, and ours to learn from. It is a mirror of human failure, but also a beacon of what can endure, the spirit that refuses to be erased, the humanity that cannot be caged, and the hope that, even in darkness, there is light. Thank you for listening. I'm Simmons, and this has been Chronicles of Black. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, talk about Ota Benga, let his story be seen, remembered, and never forgotten, because when we remember, we fight, and when we fight, we honor those who were silenced.